And we're with Sheriff Steve Freitas of Sonoma County. It's a real big deal to have you here for us, so thanks for making the time.
I appreciate you guys inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, you're in a very interesting position because you have a very large county that you're working with, and all of these moving parts, and on top of that, you are an elected official, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
How do you keep all of this working and not go utterly crazy?
Yes. Well, the way I keep it working is all the great men and women who work at the sheriff's office.
Right.
There's about 650 full-time employees and another 150 volunteers that make it all happen throughout the county, and that's really how it gets done. And what I tell people is ultimately I'm the decision maker and I'm responsible for all the decisions, but the actual day-to-day work and the workings of it get done by all the men and women at the sheriff's office.
That's what I try to do here, but it doesn't work.
Doesn't work out for you? Well, I have great people, so it's working out for us so far.
That's the trick, great people.
Yeah.
I got okay people, now they're good. But, okay, so let's harken back to the first time you decided to get involved with the law. What was it that brought you over or turned you onto the notion that a career in law enforcement would be your calling?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. First of all, my parents from an early age encouraged me to work. So I had my first job, I think, when I was 14.
Yeah, where were you doing?
And I actually wrapped presents at Christmas for a pharmacy in downtown San Jose for that 2 weeks. I can still to this day wrap a Christmas present in less than a minute very well, thank you. So my parents taught me to work at a young age, and as I continued doing different jobs, anything from milking cows at summer as I got a little older. And what they taught me though was these are all just jobs. By the time you get to college age, you need to focus on a career.
Big difference.
Think about a career, don't think about just a job.
Yeah.
And so as I got to be 21 years old or so, I was at San Jose State University. Right. My brother was working at the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office.
Oh, okay.
And he told me there's a test. You're not done with college yet, but it's hard to get into law enforcement, so you should start testing now, which is still something I would tell people. And I took the test. 600 people took the test, and 3 of us got hired.
Wow.
And so
you were still in school though when you got hired?
I was still in school. I was a junior at San Jose State.
Yeah, so did you have to wait till you...
No, I went straight to work as my parents told me, and so did my brother, this is the career you want, this is your chance. You better take it. It's not an easy career to get into.
Yeah. And then so what was your first beat like, or what did you do?
I started off at the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office, and I worked in the jail for about three and a half years, which was a great experience. I think many people who enter into law enforcement, starting in the jail is a good place to kind of get used to wearing the uniform. Mm-hmm. You kind of get to know people very well in the custody environment. I think it's a great way to get started in the business.
I love that term too, custody environment.
It's a custody environment.
It's specific,
It's its own little culture and world.
I'd imagine.
And I would encourage people, whether it be you or your viewers, to come tour the Sonoma County Jail someday. People are always very surprised at the jail and the way that we run it, and it's the people's jail, so they should know what's going on there.
So, so you're wearing the uniform for the first time, and you're taking on, it's not just a career, but it's an identity, right? Did you change as a person? Did you feel like you were evolving, or what was that?
I definitely feel like evolving sometimes and devolving sometimes also. What I tell people is, I think it's very hard for law enforcement folks. I think my wife would tell you that I've definitely changed. I don't know that the people in the uniform or the law enforcement officers see it as readily, but their close relationship people, whether it be spouses or immediate family or friends, definitely see it. And I think the reason for that is, after a certain amount of time, whether it's in custody, whether it's working the street, most of the things you deal with are not positive things. You're probably not going to call me to say, my kid just graduated from school, why don't you stop by and have some cake with us? You're going to call us to say, somebody just stole my car, my kid's missing, somebody identity theft, or there's some people, even very good people like yourself, or we deal with a lot of good people, but in that time they're in crisis.
Right.
And so it's very stressful. They've been victimized. And so it's then that stress rubs off on the cops. And after 10, 15, 20 years, it definitely creates a pretty thick shell. I feel very fortunate because my last 10 years, I've been born in administration.
Right.
I get to do things like this and talk to nice people like you and go talk to Rotary. And I think some of that, so I say I kind of devolved for a while.
Got it.
And now I'm kind of evolving back to where I enjoy doing things like this very much. But law enforcement is a difficult profession, and the things that you have to deal with, whether it's on the street or in custody, definitely take a toll on people.
It seems like you developed a bit of a shell, and then as you've moved into different aspects of your career, as you said, you're able to kind of like reel that back a bit and be a little more...
And come back out of the shell, absolutely.
Yeah,
which is a very interesting thing for me and for my wife to see also. We talk about that at home. I've been married now for 20 years, and she has seen the change from, as I've changed jobs within law enforcement, and now that I'm in this job, it's definitely, there's been a change.
And then in terms of like, your openness and availability to the media is great, thank you. But I mean, do you have to armor yourself anyway? And I don't mean like physically, but like emotionally when you're still working out there and seeing the things that you have to see.
Well, I think that I'm fortunate to some extent. I don't have to see, there is stress in my job, and sometimes I see, the negative, whether it's in the media or some of the folks that we, want to talk to me that aren't necessarily happy with law enforcement.
Right.
But the truly traumatic things that law enforcement people see, I don't do those anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. How do you deal with negative press? I mean, I get negative press sometimes, and
Certainly.
it just erodes me, and I have to really fight reacting to it. How do you deal with it? Because you do a lot more than I do.
Yeah, I think that's a way that you do to a certain extent get thick-skinned. My philosophy from the beginning, since I've become sheriff, has been if we're getting negative press and we're wrong, because cops make mistakes too.
Right.
I'm sure I've made a mistake today, and I'm probably going to make more tomorrow. We're human. We make mistakes. If we're wrong, admit it right away. Say that we're wrong, say what we did wrong, and say how we're going to fix it. If we're not wrong, we try and correct the record if the media has it wrong.
Right.
And that's why about 2 years ago we went to a full-time social media program, and people can watch the Sheriff's Office social media pages to see what we have to say and compare that to what they're seeing in the media to get both sides of the story, so to speak.
Can I ask what precipitated that?
What precipitated it is the idea to get as most accurate information as we can, because I may issue a press release.
Right.
But the media, whether it be TV or print media or radio, they can't print everything sometimes.
True.
Or they may interview me for 5 minutes, but only a 30-second clip goes on there. So with the idea of being as transparent as we can be and getting as much of the total story out to the public, we've gone to a full-time social media program.
That's great. And it allows people to correspond and work with you and that kind of
Absolutely.
thing.
It gives us more connection to the public. You mentioned Sonoma County and how large it is.
Yeah.
It's the largest of all the Bay Area counties by far, and 90% of it's unincorporated. One of the gentlemen I was talking to earlier here today mentioned Sea Ranch.
Right.
Well, Sea Ranch is in Sonoma County, and if you and me got in a car right now and drove as fast as we possibly could, it would take us 2 hours to get there.
At least,
It's hard to have that one-on-one connection in a county like that. So the social media really gives us a chance to connect with the whole community that we're responsible for at the Sheriff's Office.
That's excellent. We're with Sheriff Steve Freitas, and we'll be right back. And we're back with Sheriff Steve Freitas. We were talking a little earlier about some of the stress that those who work in law enforcement experience. And during the break, I was talking to the producers, and they suggested we explore notions of counseling. Do you guys have support programs for people on the force?
We do. There's anything from informal to more formalized. So there's definitely informal. You develop very tight friendships and relationships in law enforcement. It is kind of its own subculture, so to speak. And so you develop some really good relationships. So there's some informal stuff. When things get to a point where people really need some help, we have a very active what's called a peer support program.
Okay.
There are people within the office that go to specialized training to help other people work through whether they're work-related issues or personal issues, and we have a very strong program that way. If that doesn't work, because sometimes people don't want to share some of that stuff with their fellow employees,
right.
We have a program that you can use to go see counseling, professional counseling, psychiatrists, things like that, that's provided to the employees.
It's great. The stresses I think that people perceive law enforcement dealing with are often informed by TV. That's like their first touchstone, with law enforcement. How accurate are the depictions, you think, of? Yeah,
I like this question, thank you. I was just at Rotary in Sebastopol Wednesday, and I got this. I will tell you, I don't watch any law enforcement shows on TV, because after doing the real thing for 31 years, it is so inaccurate. It's extremely frustrating.
Yeah,
and so
it's offensive, I bet.
people get this mindset of what it's like, every day is shootings and this and that.
Right.
It's not like that. There is times of tremendous boredom, quite frankly,
Yeah.
where you get that one call and then you're in an office writing a report for 4 or 5 hours. TV doesn't show that. So TV sometimes provides us as a recruiting tool where people want to come work and then they get the reality of what it's really like, and that's a real eye-opener for people. So I can't comment on any specific shows, quite frankly, because I don't watch any of them. I've never found one that I thought was accurate.
That's probably it's a good way to approach it. But what's the atmosphere of the department right now culturally? What do you think? What kind of dynamics are afoot?
Certainly. Well, there's the greatest challenge we're facing right now is people.
What do you
We
mean?
are down probably 80 positions. We're just short staffed.
Really?
Yeah, and that's a couple of different things. Some of it is people have left because Sonoma County, quite frankly, doesn't pay as well as some other places in the Bay Area. And some of it is financial. People got families, they have mortgages just like anyone else.
Yep.
And they want to do as best as they can financially for their family. The other thing is just hiring people. You know, over the last couple of years, there's been a climate, I think, across the whole United States that is also affecting Sonoma County. And this has been written about in USA Today. The New York Times has opined about this, that law enforcement's a difficult spot to be in right now. It's heavily criticized.
I see what you're saying.
And there are times that there are things that we deserve to be criticized about. But it appears to be, to some extent, a piling on. It's culturally not only acceptable, it's kind of encouraged now to be very critical of law enforcement. And so people are more reluctant to get into the business and put themselves out there. So we're seeing, whereas we used to get about 250 applications a month, now we get less than 50.
Wow.
So the pool of applicants is dwindling, the funnel is dwindling, and very few people get hired. So the less people we having to apply creates it harder to hire people. We only hire about 2% of the people that apply. So we need 100 people to put an application to hire 2 people.
What disqualifies people? What are you looking for? And what?
A myriad of things, and that's one of the things. Again, well, I've said openly, law enforcement, I make mistakes, we make mistakes, but I would stack our mistake rate up against almost any other profession simply because the screening that it takes to get hired is very intense.
Right.
So you come in and you fill out a form that's maybe this thick.
Wow.
And then you take a polygraph test to tell us everything I said in that form is true. Right? We wipe some people out right away.
Sure. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If that's true, then we start investigating that form all the way back to high school years. We go talk to your neighbors. We show up in your neighborhood unannounced. You take another polygraph test later on about all the stuff we've learned. You take a day-long psychological profile, both written and in person with a psychiatrist, and you actually get a grade. And it has to meet with state requirements that cops have to get before they can come to work.
What's a passing grade?
A passing grade is a C.
Okay. Just like life. Okay.
Just like life, yes. And then they decide if people are suitable to be in law enforcement, and a psychiatrist basically gives them a thumbs up or a thumbs down. So additional medical tests, the polygraph that I mentioned, and a very, very rigorous background, and with many things that can disqualify people.
I had no idea it was that intense.
It's very intense. It takes about 4 months to go through the process.
So you're saying that those now in the department are people who have gone through this process, and so they're so vetted that, I mean, are they squeaky clean? I mean, what's...
I don't know that squeaky clean would be the word, because we want people that have some life experience.
Right.
You know, I've told people before, I've told this story openly. When I was a kid, I got cited for possessing alcohol.
Yeah.
And the way I learned my lesson was, the cops gave me a ticket. They called my dad, and they said, "Come get him." And my dad said, "Nope, he's going to learn his lesson."
You spend the night? Or?
I got to spend the night. And I was like 16 years old, and I learned a very valuable lesson from that. So that's not squeaky clean. So we want people who have experienced some things, obviously no felony convictions, recent misdemeanor convictions. There are some other things that'll disqualify people. So we want people that actually have really good ethics and really good character. Okay. That doesn't mean perfect. That just means you do the right thing,
when it's time to do the right thing.
Well, hopefully you do the right thing all the time. The ethics is you do the right thing when no one's watching.
There you go. Wow, well put.
Yeah.
Crime in Sonoma County.
Yes.
On an uptick?
Absolutely. Crime, specifically property crime, and when I say property crime, I mean things like auto thefts, burglaries from vehicles, burglaries from homes, things like that.
Crimes of opportunity, or just
significantly? Some of them may be crimes of opportunity, but a lot of your burglars, they plan it out very well. So some of them are very sophisticated. I know there's just an article today in the media about a burglar from Lartfield who my detectives were able to capture and return a lot of property. But those type of crimes are up significantly, up of maybe 20%.
Why? What's happening? Most
of us in law enforcement think that it's related to several of the initiatives that California has done over the last couple of years to get people out of jail. While I understand that not everybody needs to be in jail, and jails are very expensive, as we continue to let people out of jail, and quite frankly, with Proposition 47, we decriminalized several things.
Right.
Those folks now are not getting the treatment. One of the best things about jail that people don't realize is that most of the people who were in jail, especially for drug offenses, while they're there, they're getting very intensive treatment. Right. Now that they're not there, they're not as inclined to seek out that treatment on the outside that they're kind of forced into in the custody environment. And so those folks are not getting the treatment, and they're out there committing crimes. So I personally am convinced, and statewide groups like state sheriffs and the District Attorneys Association are convinced that things like Proposition 47 and realignment have resulted in an uptick in crime, absolutely.
Wow. And so in your position, you have obviously can make these sort of like on the street observations and all that. Are you, I mean, can you campaign? I mean, how do you like as a citizen
certainly
interface with the laws and that kind of thing?
Yeah, I've been very firm since I've been sheriff that I don't want to get into creating law.
Right.
My job is to enforce the law equally, whether I like it or not. Right. My personal belief about a law, quite frankly, to you as a taxpayer or a voter, my personal belief is not relevant.
Right.
My job is to follow the law whether I like them or not, and not be in the business of creating law.
Yeah.
However, I do comment sometimes when I think laws get off track. For example, like Prop 47, myself and the district attorney collaborated, and we wrote an op-ed article, and I think we did some radio stuff that said we think this is going to be a problem. We think crime's going to go up if we do this, and now here we are. It's definitely happening.
Well, let's pick up on that in a second here. We're with Sheriff Steve Freitas from Sonoma County. We'll be right back. We're back with Sheriff Steve Freitas. We're talking about the rise in local crime rates in Sonoma County, and how do you remedy this kind of situation? As you said, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. Well, we got to put something back in the bottle, right? I mean,
yeah, I agree, and I don't know, since this is so new. Realignment, is from 2011. Proposition 47 is just from last year. Until we're able to get really good data, to start trying to react without having informed data, I think might not be the best use of the taxpayers' money. I do agree that some things are going to have to change. Part of it would be not only the sheriff's office, but other agencies getting fully staffed and having enough people to be out on the street, having detectives to investigate crimes. That's part of the story, but part of it also needs to be, whether it's treatment for drug offenders, whether it's programs for people who are committing other crimes, that there's enough space for people like that. So I think it's a very, very complicated issue,
right.
And I think we're going to have to see a little more data before we can give a firm answer. Some of it, though, staffing. There's about 40 less deputies on the street than there used to be years ago.
And that's not for a funding issue, that's simply because you haven't the talent.
That's
yet.
People actually, it used to be, it started with a funding issue. Right. Now the funding is back. My budget's actually in pretty good shape.
So you've got the jobs, you get the money for the jobs, you just don't have the people for them.
Exactly.
What a fascinating issue.
And that'd be one thing I would, I get my chance to plug not only sheriff's office. A lot of people think you have to wear a uniform and a gun to work at the sheriff's office, and we want people to come work that are willing to wear a uniform and a gun. But there's a lot of other jobs too. We have accountants, and we have cooks and janitors, and you name it, we have it at the sheriff's office. So if there's people in the public who are looking for a great place to work, and they think they can pass the background that you and me talked about, we need all the people to come work for the sheriff's office that we can get.
Where do they go? Online, where do they?
Absolutely. So the sheriff's office has a website, Sonoma County Sheriff's Office website. People can go to and point them there. They can also just call the sheriff's office main number, which is 565-2650, and get directed to the personnel unit and find out what jobs are available. The county website also has a job openings thing, a job link that says what jobs within the sheriff's office are currently open and how to apply.
That's great. That's great, especially for younger people. I mean, is there space for younger people coming out of the JC?
Absolutely. Okay. So we have a Thriving Explorer program, so for like high school age students. There's many people. I have deputies who are now working things like gang unit, homicide unit, that started as explorers and work their way up. There's people who have started as assistants and community service officers and work their way up. We also have an intern program, both paid and unpaid intern programs for students at either the junior college or Sonoma State University.
Is it difficult to attract younger people into law enforcement?
It's getting more difficult.
I was going to say, it's
depending on the job. As I mentioned, we're not getting the applications we did because just the idea of being in law enforcement isn't as persuasive or
there's a cultural issue.
A cultural issue that we're struggling with.
I'd imagine it's a self-selecting group. It's probably people who really admire and want to be part of law enforcement that choose to pursue it, obviously.
Yes.
And understand it. How do you think you guys can change the perception that young people or anybody really has, and help, I guess doing things like this in part. But
I was just going to say, this is one of my, every chance I get to do something like this, I do. And I appreciate you guys giving me the chance. I've done KBBF radio in Spanish before. Any chance I can get out and tell people the reality of what the sheriff's office does, to get people to understand what we do, to come take a look at us, that's the best way to do it. There's other people. We have recruiters at the sheriff's office. So right now, I guarantee you that there's other people doing something like this for the sheriff's office right now, maybe speaking at a high school class or going to the Administration of Justice program at Sonoma State. They come and tour the sheriff's office. We speak with them. We're doing all of that we can, and hopefully we'll be able to do more if we can get some more people hired and fill some of these positions.
I think it's really important, and I think one of the reasons I like doing this show is that it allows us to put a lens on the people who really shape our daily lives in Sonoma County, but also prove that you are actually human. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I think people forget that they can't see past the uniform and the badge sometimes, and they forget that there's a real guy right here.
Very true. Very true.
Do you feel that, like, out there in the world, that they see the badge first and they don't realize that you and your staff are actual people?
I see it less now that I'm in this job, because I develop relationships with people. But I know, as a deputy working the street, it's fun. Whether it's Little League or whether your friend invites you to a barbecue, the opening introduction isn't always, "Hey, this is my friend Steve." It's always, "This is my friend Steve. He's a cop."
Right. It's you need to tip them off.
There's always that caveat, and so it does create that little cultural barrier. And some people are fascinated because, let's face it, as we mentioned, what are the percentage of TV shows that are law enforcement related?
All of them.
People are fascinated by law enforcement. So what you get is people asking you a lot of questions, or my Aunt B got a ticket in North Carolina. Can you explain that to me?
Right.
It creates some fascinating friendships and chances to talk to people about law enforcement.
And most people actually don't interface with law enforcement unless they're in trouble or they're in crisis. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, as I mentioned, people don't call us to say, "Hey, we had the report card was really good today. Why don't you come by and celebrate with us?"
Yeah.
They call to say something's gone wrong. So.
I mean, what could people do to sort of engage you guys in a manner that they're not just the community, and you guys just aren't law enforcement? It's like you guys we're all part of the community. How can you build those bridges and relationships?
There's many things that we do like that. For example, Santa Rosa has a large Cinco de Mayo festival every year, and we send a lot of staff down there. We just did a charity soccer game in Roseland maybe a month or two ago, where our deputies went and played soccer with the youth in Roseland. So we do things like that, and when there's events like that, when we're out in the public doing those community events, to take the opportunity to come up and talk to the folks and get to know them a little bit, that's a great opportunity. And sometimes the officers and deputies in the field, they may be having a cup of coffee, just like you may do at Starbucks or something, going up and saying hi and, how's your day going today? Just having a conversation. If you can get past that uniform, you find many times that they like the chance to have a regular conversation before they have to go do the next difficult thing that they're going to have to do.
Right. Yeah. No, it's fascinating, and I obviously I get to speak to a lot of you guys because I work in media and all that, and I'm always reminded that all right, these are just people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are there occasions when you're not just a person, though, like when you really have to wear the badge and step up to an impression of what law enforcement can be?
Yeah, a good example of that is, and I just had this happen, I'm active in my church. I go to church in Windsor, and sometimes people will call with questions, and they'll say, "Hey, I've got to run this situation by you, Steve. I need your advice." And some of it is I'm required by laws to report certain things, whether I like it or not. So I give people the disclaimer, I want to help you, but if you tell me certain things, I'm going to report it.
Right.
And so there is sometimes where my job mandates what I do, even on a personal level.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely things like that.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
What do you do when you're not doing this kind of work? What do you?
Family.
Yeah.
Very, very important. I mentioned I'm active in the church.
Yeah.
We have an RV. We camp once a month, rain or shine. Nice. If it's raining really bad, my wife generally doesn't go, but the boys are good. They just get muddy and change their clothes.
And it's important to do that kind of stuff, to keep that kind of stuff going.
I agree. It's one of the things where, for example, Friday nights, I never do any type of work or political activity. That is Friday family night. We barbecue and watch a movie as a family every Friday night.
Right on, man.
So keeping things like that to stay, close and connected with the boys and my wife. Yeah.
Cool. Well, here we are with Sheriff Steve Freitas of Sonoma County. Thank you for coming in. I hope you come back.
Absolutely.
And
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's good.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.